So let's jump right in. I love starting on time. I'm Ethan. I'll say a little bit more about me in just a second. But I just wanted to say that if you have a question, feel free to type it in the box. I might stop the presentation and answer it. I might wait till the end. But I got some cool stuff to share. And I encourage you, if you're a parent listening, to go ahead and do the exercises because they're kind of fun. So let's jump in. Some quick facts on me. I went to Northwestern University, studied performance studies, which is basically like a glorified acting degree, if such a thing can be said about an acting degree. I got a master's in acting, if that wasn't enough, from UC Irvine. And then I got two counseling certificates, one from UC Irvine in college counseling, helping students do just the thing that we're going to be doing today, and a counseling certificate, more in like therapy type stuff, is what I like to call it. And as Eric just mentioned, I've spent about 10 years doing this, doing lots of different things, doing writing curriculum, teaching, but really my passion is being the college essay guy. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. A lot of it I put together in a book, which I'll tell you about at the end. That's coming out actually in 2 days that I'm super excited about. And the other thing you should know about me is that I'm a dad. I have a wife. She's amazing. She's just not pictured here. And this is my amazing daughter, Zola. So she's not here right now, but she is in the room with me in my heart. So really quickly, how did I get into this whole thing? I worked at a video store when I was like 15 years old. In the 10th grade. It was called Videoland. And I was basically obsessed with movies. And I was so obsessed with movies, in fact, that I went to Northwestern University. And part of what I studied there, in addition to acting, was screenwriting. And my best friend and I would get together in this very building and we would pull all-nighters to work on screenplays. And we loved it so much, in fact, that we moved to Canada. I guess it was after my senior year, like, when I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do with my life, but was pretty sure that it had to do something with writing. We moved to the University of Windsor. We holed up there and wrote our first screenplay. And it was terrible. It was really, how would you say, not self-referential, but it was basically about three friends graduating college and trying to figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. So it was totally personal and autobiographical, as most first scripts are. But we did it. Like, we finished the script. It was 90 pages, and we were super excited. And after that trip, I moved to New York. Ryan had one more year. This is my best friend in college, and he was applying to one school for graduate school. And I do not recommend you do this. I highly recommend you apply to more than one school. But he was applying to USC for screenwriting, and I'll explain why this blue car is on the screen in a second. The chances of him getting in were so unlikely that I said, dude, if you get into USC for screenwriting, I will leave New York. I'll move to LA with you. So be careful what you say, because he got into USC. So I quit my job in New York, flew back to Chicago. We hopped in his 92 Corolla named Blue, pictured here. And we drove out to LA to make it big. And we actually lived in the shadow of the Hollywood sign. I don't live too far from here now. I'm probably like 15 minutes from the sign now. And Ryan actually did kind of make it big. Like, he went on to win this Disney fellowship and wrote for Grey's Anatomy and wrote for Chicago PD up until this year. And now he writes for a show called Conviction. And I became the college essay guy, like you do. But before I became college essay guy, there were all these books that we read. Basically, I stole his USC screenwriting education. And it was, looking at all these books and reading them, a lot of them boil down to the same idea of the hero's journey, which you may have heard about in like an English class, or, it's like basically the story to end all stories. It's the mythological story that, that sort of underpins all of our stories, of a hero who is called to adventure. There's some sort of moment that happens where the hero goes from the known into the unknown and goes through some kind of process, some kind of trials and tribulations, also known as the abyss, comes back with new gifts. And as I was studying this structure and studying screenwriting structure, my day job was helping students with their college essays. And because I'm in California, a lot of my students were applying to the UC schools. That's what UC stands for here. And they were answering this prompt, which is the old prompt. They've got new prompts now. But it was describe the world you come from and tell us how your world has shaped your dreams and aspirations. Now, I don't know how that question feels to you, but it's a pretty huge and, in my mind, awesome question. Describe the world you come from, in other words, your past and present, and tell us how these elements have shaped your dreams and aspirations. Now, as I was working with students on this prompt, there are, in my mind, two parts to this. Really three parts, but I'm going to talk about two parts. One, the world that you come from. And a lot of the students that I worked with it kind of fell into two camps. There were students that I'd worked with who had faced challenges in their life, And there were other students who felt like, no, they hadn't really faced challenges. And some of the students who'd faced challenges, wanted to write about those challenges. So I'm asking you right now, you who are on this webinar, have you faced challenges in your life? Just sort of answer that for yourself, whether you're a student, parent, counselor. And then second part, I would always ask my students, in terms of your dreams and aspirations, would you say that you know what you want to do or be when you grow up or not? So answer that for yourself. Yes, I know what I want to be when I grow up, whether you're an adult or a student, or I don't really know, or I'm still figuring it out. And the third part of that is, how have they shaped? So we're looking at your past, the world, maybe it's about your challenges. And the second part is your dreams and aspirations. Where are you headed into the future? And the key to the essay is figuring out, okay, how do I talk about how these things are connected? But I found that in working with students, this kind of led to 4 types of essays. In the type A category, we have students who have faced challenges and who know what they want to study. In the type B essay category, we have students who've not faced challenges, but who do know what they want to study. Students in the C category the essays in the C category are students who've not faced challenges, but have faced challenges, but don't know what they want to study. And then you've got students who have not faced challenges, but do know what they want to study. I'm sorry, I misread it. Students who have not faced challenges and don't know what they want to study. So just take a look at those for a second. I like to call them types of essays, not types of students, because you could write any one of these, no matter whether you face challenges or not, whether you know what you want to do or not. But what I hope you'll take away from this graph is that you can write a great essay. This is like the first takeaway. You can write a great essay whether you face challenges or not, and whether you know what you want to be or do in the future or not. To me, it just takes a different type of approach. So the structure for this little webinar is going to be, we're going to spend some time, probably about 10 or 15 minutes, talking about content. Like, how do you figure out what to write about? How do you find your deepest story? And then we're going to shift, and I'm going to give you 2 types of structure to help tell your story. So the first part will be about what do you tell? The second part will be about how do you tell your story? And I'll give you 2 structure options. And then we're going to look at 2 example essays. All right, that's what we're about. So let's start with the brainstorming exercise. So for this, you will need something to write with. You can use a pen, you can type into your computer. If you're on a smartphone, you're super fancy. Not that you're just super fancy for having a smartphone, but watching a webinar on a smartphone is pretty fancy. You can just open up a notes application and take notes for this. This exercise, this first one's going to take about 8 minutes. And even if you're a parent or student, don't assume that this is not for you. This is actually a really awesome exercise. My grandmother totally loved this exercise when she did it like 6 months ago. So here's how this first exercise goes. And I want you to open up to the possibility that you could generate some content in these 8 minutes that you could actually use for your actual personal statement. So here goes. I want you to imagine a box. And in this box is a set of essence objects. Now, what do I mean by essence objects? What I'm talking about here is objects that represent important qualities or relationships in your life, essences for who you are. Let me give a couple examples. In the room I'm in right now, I look on my wrist and I see a friendship bracelet. And this friendship bracelet is blue and white and gray, and it's frayed. So I would write down frayed friendship bracelet. It was given to me by my wife, Veronica, and she gives it to me every year. She gives me a friendship bracelet every year. It's the only gift that she gives me on my birthday because she is my best friend. And the cool thing about this bracelet is that it wears off after about 10 months just from wearing it every day. And so she has to tie a new bracelet on each year. And for me, that represents remaking our commitment to one another, renewing our marriage. So to me, it's even more meaningful than the wedding ring, which I also wear, because I have to recreate it. So I wouldn't write down all that. I would just write down the bracelet. Another object that I would put in there would be barbecue sauce, because I love barbecue sauce. I eat it on a lot of things. Not everything, but I eat it on a lot of things. And it reminds me of my grandmother, because my grandmother is from the South. She's 91 years old and cooked with barbecue sauce growing up, so it reminds me of her. I'm also reminded of a Bible that she gave me when I was 7 years old. I would write down Blue Bible with my name stitched on it in gold, because she gave that to me. And that to me represents my connection with the church. I was raised as a missionary kid, raised as a pastor's kid, actually. And even though my relationship to the church has changed, I'd say that really represents a lot of the important influences in my life. So someone just asked, do the objects have to be significant? Yeah, I'd say write down the ones that represent, actually the objects don't have to be significant, but the essences have to be significant. So so far I've mentioned my wife, my connection with her, something that I love, barbecue sauce. That might seem trivial, but there's a deeper sort of meaning for it. It doesn't have to all be deep. You can just kind of brainstorm. And when we're brainstorming, it's sort of like, yes, let's just put it up there and see what lands. Don't overthink this too much. I'd rather you go quantity over quality here. Hopefully there will be some quality within the quantity. Let me give you one more example. A blue and white North Carolina basketball that's worn down, and that represents how my dad used to connect with me. We used to play a lot of basketball growing up. And I still remember fondly like playing basketball with him in the backyard. So I would write down blue and white basketball. So those are 3 or 4 objects for me. I want you to try and come up with 10 objects in the next few minutes. And I'm going to give you some ideas, some things to think about. If you're watching this in a recorded version and you want to put on a little music to inspire you, that's cool. So what are your essence objects? Make a list now. I'll just give you some ideas, some questions, things to think about. What's an object, or what's a food that reminds you of your family? What's an object that reminds you of home? Whatever home means to you. What object makes you feel safe? When you think about your connection with your dad, your father, what object represents your connection with your father? And if you don't really have a relationship with your father, that's okay. What object represents your connection or your lack of connection? What object represents your connection with a father surrogate, someone who stood in for him while you were growing up? Someone asked, can we respond to it in the chat? Maybe we can get some ideas from there. Sure. If you want to put if anybody wants to put their objects in, you can feel free to type that in the chat box. It'll help, though, probably just to listen to the questions. What object represents your connection with your mom? And again, if you don't have a connection with your mom, what object represents that lack of connection? Or a connection with a mother surrogate, someone who stood in for her, maybe a grandmother or an aunt. If you've been through challenges in your life, what object represents maybe some of those challenges? I notice some people are raising their hands. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in the box and I'll respond. Someone asks, says I was bullied in elementary school. How can I make an object out of that? Well, what object represents the feeling that you felt being bullied? I had a student who used to be called the pink, I won't say the word, but B. And so you might just write down the color pink, because that reminds me of being bullied. I think back to my being bullied. There were I remember the bully, the guy who used to kick me, used to have these shoes that were kind of worn around the edges. They were like these blue skater shoes. So I might write down like blue skater shoes. And I might write in parentheses, bullied, in parentheses, just to remind me. So if you face challenges, what object reminds you of some of those challenges or one of those challenges? Was it a divorce, A move? Did you have to move somewhere? Was there someone that you lost? An illness? Just maybe being really shy. When you think about those challenges or whatever challenge you faced, and you think about what helped get you through the experience, what resources did you draw on to get through it? So let's say, for example, one of the things I faced growing up was my parents got divorced. And one of the resources that I drew on through that is I had to learn to connect with other people because I was trying to get love and affection and connection. And so one of the ways that I connected with other people was theater. And I did this play called True West. And so I would just put like True West, like the playbill, as an object that reminds me of ways that I got my needs met. So back to my question. When you think about the challenges you faced, what helped bring you through? Was it creativity? Was it connection? Was it adaptability? Did you have to learn to adapt? If so, can you phrase that in terms of a specific concrete object? I'll explain why in a few minutes why we're doing objects. Well, I'll tell you right now, objects can have metaphoric significance. They can also lead to actual stories. But sometimes objects mean more than just abstract words do. Someone asks, how deep should the challenge be? Whatever's coming up for you. There's no right or wrong for that. Just a few more minutes on this exercise. What's a favorite book? Or an essence piece of art? If you were trapped on a deserted island and had to look at one piece of art, or had to watch one movie, or listen to only one song, what would these be? What's something that you're really good at? What object could represent that? I'm just going to go rapid fire here. Just take whatever's useful. What is your actual superpower? Someone asked, could it be the dumbbells in my room reminding me that I don't work out regularly? If that feels like an important essence, great. Go for it. The answer is probably yes. What's something that you're afraid of? What's a secret that you have? What's something that maybe only one other person knows, or maybe no one else knows? What's something you love to do so much that you lose time? You get into a state of flow. What would your ideal Saturday night look like? Or your ideal Sunday morning? I know I'm giving you too many too fast, but I'm hoping that it'll jog something for you. Just a few more here. Survey your list. What's missing? Are there qualities of yourself that you really appreciate? Maybe there's a quality about yourself that you don't reveal all that often, or that people don't see. Like maybe you think you're really funny, but no one else seems to. How could you phrase that in terms of an object? Or maybe you're really organized, but to look at your room, you wouldn't know it. What object could represent that organization? Post-it notes, X-Acto knife. These objects can mean more than just objects. Okay. There's more time we could spend on this, but we're going to move on. If you want to go through a slightly longer version of that exercise, you can just Google College Essay Guy Objects Exercise, and there's like a 16-minute version of that on SoundCloud you can check out. Second exercise, this one's going to take about 3 minutes. It's called the Values Exercise. I want you to look at this list of values, and I want you to pick your top 10. So just write them down wherever you are. This is just half of the list. I'll switch back and forth between the top half of the list and the bottom. But take a look at this list of values. I'm only going to give you 2 minutes, and I want you to come up with your top 10 values. What are your top values? I'm going to shift to the bottom part of the list, and then I'll come back to the top again. And notice if there's something on this list, or if there's something that's not on this list that you want to write in as being a top value, you can write that in. And someone just asked, if I make noise, will everyone be able to hear me, or am I muted? No, everyone's muted except for me. You only got 1 minute left. What are your top values? I know that's not enough time, and you're going, that's crazy. That's not enough time. That's fine. Go with your gut. Go with your intuition here. What are your top values? Someone asks, is this list available on your website? Great question. Yeah, if you Google College Essay Guy Values Exercise, you can find this list. You can find a PDF that you can download. Feel free to do that. Here's the top part of the list. Someone asks if I can zoom in. I don't think I can zoom in without messing everything up. So if you can't see this, try Googling it. And if you look at the top, there's the link at the top, collegeessayguide.com/guide-values-exercise. If you need to go back and do this later, that's okay too. Just about another 30 seconds here. I'm going to go to the bottom just for about 15 more seconds. Top 10 values. Okay, got your top 10? Cool, make it a top 5 list. So of those 10, now choose just 5, and you got 30 seconds. "15 seconds. What are your top 5 values? What would you really fight for?" Okay, time's up. Top 3 values. Pick top 3, and you got 10 seconds. What are the things that make your life worth living? You can probably guess what I'm going to say next, right? Number 1, what is your number 1 value? If this is difficult, that's good. That means you're doing the exercise. Okay. So, if we were live in a workshop, if I was sitting across the table from you, I'd ask you to talk about your top value. But we're not, so, and I want to be able to move forward. But here's what I'll say. Your number 1 value, if you chose that value out of all these values, and you're writing a personal statement, chances are that value is going to make its way into your personal statement somehow. Now, I don't know how that's going to manifest itself, or, but look at your top 3. This is what makes you you. And so what we've basically done in the last 15 minutes is created a kind of menu of potential topics. Now, these may not look like topics. They may just look like sort of, to someone else, they would look like just random, details. But to you, these are what make up your world. And I think your dreams and aspirations. Because if you think about it, your future career is not your dream and aspiration. I think the career is the means by which you experience and express your values. So let me say that in a different way. If you think of the essence object list as being who you are, that's your past and your present, who you've been. Your values, I think, that's where you've gotten to. And I think as your working draft of where you're headed in the future. These are the things that will be important to you going forward. at least for the next, little while. So, we would need more time to kind of unpack. And if we were live in a workshop, I would say, okay, let's start, get with a partner and start to unpack these. But for now, what we're left with is a menu. Let me show you how we take these into the two types of essays. So this is where we're shifting from content, what do we write about, to how do we write about it. There are two types of structure. There's narrative structure, which I'll talk about now, and montage structure. So again, I just want to acknowledge that we haven't had enough time for you to really pick a topic yet, but I'll show you how these essence objects can work their way into an essay. So narrative structure, let's talk about it. Narrative structure is basically the structure used by most American films. Any of these films that you see on this list are basically using the narrative structure. And the way narrative structure works is there's an outside story, which is the main plot of the film, and there's an inside story, which is what's sometimes called the B story. Now, the outside story might be the universe is being taken over by the forces of evil, but the inside story is about a young man who must learn to believe in himself. And you can probably guess what movie I'm talking about. There are many movies like this, but the one I'm thinking of is Star Wars. And one interesting way of thinking about this is, and this is from my stolen USC screenwriting education, that the outside story is about what the character wants, and the inside story is about what the character actually needs. Now, consider that there are moments in our lives when we've been pursuing something that we wanted, and all along, our friends or our family members, everyone else knew that there was actually something deeper that we needed. Sometimes we're aware of this. Usually it's not we're aware of it in the moment, or else we would shift our tactics and our strategy. Usually it's something that we have to kind of look back on to figure out. Let me show you really quickly how narrative structure works in a movie. So, and how this want and need thing applies. So narrative structure is basically, it begins with status quo. Most movies begin with some kind of, here is the state of things. And that's established so that when the inciting incident happens, and the inciting incident is the moment that happens in all Pixar movies at like minute 12, between minute 12 and 15, something happens. Buzz Lightyear shows up, or Nemo and his dad get separated, or you get the examples. That there's a status quo change where something shifts, and this inciting incident launches a question, the question that won't be answered until the end of the movie. So status quo is like, it was just another sunny day in Los Angeles when all of a sudden, boom, an earthquake strikes. And then the raising of the stakes is like giving us, the viewer, an understanding of why this was such a big deal to the main character. Now, in your college essay, obviously the main character is you. So what we'll need to understand in the middle of your story is, why was this inciting incident, this thing, such a big deal? This, whatever this moment is that starts your story. The moment of truth is a moment that is, artificially constructed in films, where it's the moment oftentimes when a character has to make a big decision. And that decision, in many Pixar films, is a decision where the character has to choose between his want and his need. And usually I say his because it's often a male character, but sometimes it's a female character. And the result of that decision leads to a new status quo. So the movie begins at point, A, inciting incident launches the story, raising of the stakes, things become more and more important until there's a moment of decision. And then the result of that decision gives us the new status quo, the change. And that's how we know the character has gone through some kind of catharsis. So we've got Toy Story, we've got Finding Nemo. I would normally do a show of hands, but that will be chaos on the chat room. So let's just go with Finding Nemo. So Finding Nemo, how does it work? Status quo. You remember the beginning of this movie? I use these two examples because a lot of people have seen these movies. If you haven't, I highly recommend them, especially Finding Nemo. So status quo, and I'll have to probably update this to Finding Dory as soon as I see it. So status quo, it's the movie starts off, and basically what we need in the status quo is just enough information to understand why the inciting incident is a big deal. So we can actually work backward from that. The inciting incident, which launches the plot, is obviously the moment when Dad and Nemo are separated. But ask yourself, why is that such a big deal for Dad and Nemo? Like, how would we make the reader or the audience member feel something for these two people? Well, wouldn't it be even more terrible if they were all they had in each other's world, right? So when you think about this, the writers must have thought, okay, how can we raise the stakes even at the very beginning of the movie to get people to buy into this guy's story? Well, what if we killed not just one, but all of the family, including the mother and all the babies, and just left the dad and this one son who has kind of a, one smallish little fin? Wouldn't that, get us some more buy-in? Absolutely. So what we're left feeling at the beginning of this movie is, wow, at least they've got each other, right? No. What's the worst thing that can happen? The inciting incident is often an answer to the question, what is the worst thing that could happen to this main character? And sure enough, they get separated, which launches the story. Now, that's the A story, the plot. Will they find Nemo? And that question won't be answered until the end of the movie. It's the same in a romantic comedy. Will they end up together? In an action film, will he save the world or will she save the world? Right? That's the kind of arc that we're following for the whole movie. But there's a B story. And it's the main character, I think, of Finding Nemo isn't Nemo, but Marlin, right? The dad. He goes through the most change. Because what's his problem? Well, we learn based on this trauma, losing all of his family, he's super overprotective. And we see this from the first moment in the movie. Well, one of the first moments after the disaster, when Nemo's heading off to school. Notice the double meaning on school. And he's super nervous. Be careful, don't do this, don't do that. And we start to think to ourselves, especially because we see it through the Dory character, the Ellen character, right? Like, oh, this guy's really needs to get over this. And here's what's dynamic about Finding Nemo and what keeps us interested through the whole movie. Because we're watching to see if he will get his want, which is to find Nemo, but we're also looking to see, will he get his need? Because while his want is to hold on to Nemo and find him and hold him and never let him go again, his need is actually the opposite. Not to hold on to Nemo, but what? To let go. So we're watching this movie to see, okay, will he get his want and will he get his need? And what makes it so dynamic is that they're opposed and he's working against himself. Now, how do you do this in an essay? I'll show you later. But we're watching this movie to see, will he get both of these things? Raising of the stakes, things become lots more important, moment of truth. Now, they find Nemo, and ostensibly that's the end of the movie. But after they find Nemo, there's still something left to be discovered. Will Dad let go of Nemo? And there's this moment where Dory gets caught in the fishnet. Nemo, wants to go save her. Dad says no. And then he says, okay, go. He lets Nemo go. So we see he's starting to learn the lesson. Nemo saves Dory. Happy ending. Epilogue. Epilogue, Nemo's going off to school. Now, this is the new status quo. And we're waiting to see, did Dad really learn his lesson here? Now, if Dad does the same thing and says, hey, be careful, we think Dad hasn't changed, right? And sometimes that happens in movies. That's kind of how comedies end. Oh, this guy will never change. But in this case, he doesn't. He says, have an adventure, and he sends Nemo off. So we see that he's truly changed, and all the parents in the audience cry and everything, because this is like letting every kid go, right? So I'm starting to just get this as a parent. So that's basically how it works in Finding Nemo. Let's talk about how it works in an actual essay. So if you type in, if you want to follow along on the website, you can. If you just type in with debate essay, I'm going to read it to you, so you don't have to if you don't want to. And this was written by a student who did face challenges, and she knew what she wanted to study. So notice the points of narrative structure, and I'll pause to talk about them as we go. The essay begins, the clock was remarkably slow as I sat, legs tightly crossed, squirming at my desk. Just raise your hand, my mind pleaded. Ask. But despite my urgent need to visit the restroom, I remained seated, begging time to move faster. You see, I was that type of kid to eat French fries dry because I couldn't confront the McDonald's cashier for some Heinz packets. I was also the type to sit crying in front of school instead of asking the office if it could check on my late ride. Essentially, I chose to struggle through a problem if the solution involved speaking out against it. Okay, so status quo, what's her problem? And if you do have a problem or a challenge that you're trying to overcome, I think it's good to get it out in the first paragraph. In this case, it's really clear. She's super shy. Essence objects, do you notice any? She's got dry French fries and ketchup packets, which she could never access. So these objects, which might look to somebody else just like objects, for her, they represent the details, bringing to life this shyness. Because she could have said, I was just really shy growing up, trust me. But instead, she brings it to life with objects, with images that get us a sense of just how shy she really was. So that's the status quo. My diffidence was frustrating. My parents relied on me, the only one able to speak English, to guide them, and always anticipated the best from me. Okay, now she's raising the stakes. We don't have the inciting incident yet, but she's raising the stakes. She's letting us know that this is important not only to her, but to her parents. So now she really needs to overcome this. However, as calls for help grew, the more defunct I became. I felt that every move I made, it was a gamble between success and failure. For me, the fear of failure and disappointment far outweighed the possibility of triumph. So I took no action and chose to silently suffer under pressure. Do you hear how deep that's getting? We really get a sense in the second paragraph of how much this meant to her. Okay, near meltdown, I knew something needed to be done. Mustering up the little courage I had, I sought ways to break out of my shell, without luck. Recreational art classes ended in 3 boring months. I gave up self-defense after embarrassing myself in class. After-school band, library volunteering, and book clubs ended similarly. Continued effort yielded nothing. Now notice she fails 5 times in this paragraph, which I love, because in this context, it doesn't say this girl's a loser. It says what? That she's trying, she's working hard. So it's demonstrating a core value of perseverance, grit, hard work, all that stuff. But it's also raising the stakes. This girl, she's got to do something. She needs to break out of this, right? We're getting more and more on her side. What's going to get her out of this? Disillusioned and wrung dry of ideas, I followed my mom's advice and joined a debate club. Now, based on the title of the essay, you can probably guess this is the inciting incident. As expected, the club only reaffirmed my self-doubt. Eye contact, greater volume, no thanks. She's doing something really smart here. She's resisting the call to action. In other words, this is the moment that will change her life. And just as in every movie, she does what every hero, when they're asked to go on the adventure of a lifetime, does. No, I'm retired, or I'm out of the game. I don't do that anymore. So she's resisting the call to action, just as we always do. And it makes sense. And also, by the way, this is the worst thing that could happen to her. So for somebody who's so shy that she can't even ask to go pee, to be asked to defend her ideas in public, now we understand why the debate club is such a big idea. And it's such a big deal, Because if she'd started the essay with just, I followed my mom's advice and joined a debate club, we might be like, so what? Who cares? But in the status quo, she's established why this was the worst idea for her. But soon, turning point, the club moved on from how to make a speech lesson to the exploration of argumentation. We were taught to speak the language of persuasion and play the game of debate. Eventually, I fell in love with it all. By high school, I joined the school debate team, began socializing, and was even elected to head several clubs. I developed critical and analytical thinking skills and learned how to think and speak spontaneously. This is, I think, the most important paragraph in the essay, and if you're not looking carefully, you might miss it. But in this paragraph, she gives about 4 or 5 values from that values list that are going to serve her in college and beyond. Look closely at this sentence. By high school, I joined the school debate team, began socializing, so she's getting better at working with people, was even elected to head several clubs. She's developing leadership. Next sentence, I developed critical and analytical thinking skills and learned how to think and speak spontaneously. Not just think on my feet, but speak, articulate myself spontaneously. So there are at least 4 or 5 values there. Now, this is why values are so important. And another reason why that values exercise is going to be something you might want to go back to. Because when you ask yourself, what is this girl going to do in the future? If you had to guess, what would you say? Sometimes people say, oh, diplomat, or she's going to be a lawyer, or sometimes people say teacher. Well, the fact is, it could be a personal trainer or a counselor. Because look at those qualities, right? Being good with people, critical thinking skills, thinking and speaking spontaneously. Those are going to apply to basically any career. And that's true of any values, basically. You can make a connection between most any value in any career. Now, you might think, well, that might make the essay general. No, it's the specific values you choose and how you articulate how they'll serve you in your career, if it isn't obvious. Let's see how she does that. I became proud and confident. Moreover, I became eager to play my role in the family, and family relations strengthened. So now it's helping even her family. In fact, nowadays, my parents are interested in my school's newest gossip, so she's kind of closing that loop. 4 years of debate, and now I'm the kid up at the whiteboard, the kid leading discussions, and the kid standing up for her beliefs. That's the new status quo. Original status quo, she was too shy to ask to go to the bathroom and too shy to ask for ketchup. Now, she says, I'm the kid up at the whiteboard, the kid leading discussions, standing up for her beliefs. So you can think of this as, if you're thinking of those like classic diet shots before and after, this is the after shot. Okay, but for the end, she's got to answer, so what? That's the most important thing for an ending. Can you answer so what? And here's how she does it. More importantly, she says, I now confront issues instead of avoiding them. It's exciting to discover solutions to problems that affect others, as I was able to do as part of the first place team for the 2010 United Nations Global Debates Program on climate change and poverty. I take a natural interest in global issues and plan to become a foreign affairs analyst or diplomat by studying international affairs with a focus on national identity. Wow, some great stuff in there. Briefly, one, she's worked in a cool brag, but you may not have even seen it as a brag because she's connecting it to an important value. Pro tip, if you want to brag in your essay, connect it to a value. In this case, the value is finding her voice. So this is external validation that she's found her voice. She's really changed and other people are taking notice. And finally, notice how specific she gets with her future career. It's not vague. She's done some research because I told her to do some research over 6 or 8 drafts, and she found something really specific. It also, being specific there, will help you figure out what to say in the end of the essay. So notice she says, with a focus on national identity, which segues nicely into, in particular, I'm interested in the North-South Korean tension. What irreconcilable differences have prompted a civilization to separate? Policy implications remain vague, and sovereignty theories have their limits. How do we determine what compromises are to be made? And on a personal level, why did my grandfather have to flee from his destroyed North Korean hometown? And why does it matter? So, pro tip here, one of the great ways to show your intelligence is not through smart statements, but through smart questions. She has some great ones here that really give us a sense that she knows what she's talking about. I told her, you need to sound like a grad student in diplomacy here. So she did some research. She found what are the questions that people are asking, and she put them in her own words. Last paragraph. I see a reflection of myself in the divide at the 38th parallel, because I see one part isolating itself in defense to outside threats. So she's talking about the North-South Korean dividing line. And she's saying, I see myself in this dividing line because one part of me is like, North Korea isolating itself in defense to outside threats. And another part coming out to face the world as one of the fastest developing nations. Just as my shy persona before debate and extroverted character after debate are both part of who I am, the Korean civilization is also one. And just as my parents expect much from me, the first in my family to attend college, I have grand expectations for this field of study. So she's also first generation. So someone on the call just asked, what college was this sent to? This student ended up at Stanford. Brilliant student. The fact that she had a 2340 on her SAT really helped. But the four things that I want to point out about this essay, and I think the four qualities of a great essay, and by the way, I'm doing another webinar on July 7th, so in about 8 days, where I'm going to talk about what are the qualities of a great essay. But I'll tell you what they are briefly here, and then I'll send you information about that webinar. But number one, vulnerability. She's revealing something that she may not reveal to everyone. So I get a sense of her, and I get a sense of her heart, not just her mind. Number two, core values. I know what she represents. I know what she stands for, based on that one little paragraph, but based on what comes after. Number three, so what moments of insight. There are moments that she says something unexpected that kind of goes, oh, and it kind of piques my interest. And craft. Craft is the sense that and this took her like 15 drafts, that she worked over several drafts to revise this so that every paragraph, every sentence, every word means something. So, narrative structure, which we've just discussed, is going to work great for A and C essays about challenges. But let's say you don't have challenges, or let's say you don't want to write about your challenges, or let's say you're writing a supplemental essay on an extracurricular activity. Well, I'd recommend the montage structure. Now, whereas narrative structure is about this led to that, kind of a causal effect, montage structure doesn't connect events causally. It connects events thematically. And by events, I mean all the stuff in your story that you want to tell. And there are fewer movies that have this structure. It's not as popular, but these movies, which are all brilliant and beautiful, have thematic connections that connect all of their images. So let's look at another example essay. This is a shorter one, so it's about 3 minutes long. And this was written for the UC essay, the University of California essay. Do, re, fa, mi, re, do, sol, fa, mi, re. Have I completely lost it? Should I be locked up in a mental hospital, chained to a chair? No. Then what are these utterances coming from my mouth? Music. I've devoted thousands of hours of my life to playing the santur, a classical Persian instrument that originated in the Middle East. Some people think I'm strange, a Persian, red-headed Jewish teenager obsessed with an ancient musical instrument. But they don't see what I see. My santur is King David's lyre. It can soothe, enrapture, mesmerize. The santur also allows me to connect to my culture and Persian heritage, and to visit Iran of the past, a culture rich in artistic tradition. Sometimes I imagine performing for the king in the hanging gardens of Babylon, the santur sounds echoing through the 7 hills of Jerusalem. I love that line. Today, some Americans view Iran as a land of terrorists, but when I play the innocent of Iran, the educated, the artists, the innovators come to life. Iran's not a country of savages. It's Kubla Khan's fountain, an abundant source of knowledge and creativity. Finally, the santur represents one of my remaining links to my grandfather. In the last few years of his life, Baba Jun didn't know me as his grandson. Alzheimer's slowly took over his brain, and eventually he couldn't recognize me. Baba Jun grew up with the music of the santur, and my father plays it in his car every day. So when I play, the music connects all 3 generations. In December, I'll be releasing my first album, a collection of classical Persian pieces. Proceeds from the album will go toward Alzheimer's research, as I hope to play some small part in finding a cure for the disease. My teacher is one of only a handful of santur teachers from Iran, and I sometimes wonder if the santur will soon become extinct, like the 7,000 endangered languages, which may soon be gone. Not if I have anything to say about it. So, I want to tell you what I love about this essay. So a boring UC response, or a boring essay, uses a common topic, like let's say basketball, and common connections. Basketball has taught me the value of hard work and dedication, and common language. And that's why I love basketball. But a standout essay, so here's the answer to how do you stand out in your essay, chooses an uncommon topic. Now, not everybody has an uncommon topic, but an uncommon topic will make the essay stand out. Makes uncommon connections. And I'll go back and show you some uncommon connections he's making in just a second. And uses uncommon language. So what do I mean by uncommon connections and uncommon language? Well, a boring music essay would say it's taught me the value, the Sun Tour has taught me the value of discipline and working hard for, what I want to do, or it taught me the value of hard work. Well, that's kind of boring. I'd rather hear, and again, you can use your values exercise for this. I'd rather read the essay that talks about how music has taught me the value of how music can be, can institute social change, can be a tool for social change, as he does in this paragraph here. Or, how has music connected you to culture? Or how is music like an endangered language? That's an amazing idea. And notice the uncommon language he's using here. The performing for the king in the hanging gardens of Babylon, the Santur sounds echoing through the 7 hills of Jerusalem. You can hear the music echoing in that. It's an example of the form, meaning the way that he's writing the essay, matching the content, what he's writing about. Now, you might be thinking, I can't write like that, or I don't play the Santur. That's okay. If you don't have an uncommon topic, and you feel like you're not capable of uncommon language, and by the way, you are, it just takes lots and lots of drafts, because by the way, both of these essays were written by students who also thought, I can't write. It just took them 15 drafts to get there. So you can make up for it in hard work. Anyway, that was a long parenthetical. If you don't have an uncommon topic and you don't have uncommon language, you can still make uncommon connections. How do you do that? You basically have to brainstorm, what would the cliche version of my essay sound like? And you can look at your values list and come up with 3 or 4 cliche values, and then decide, I'm not going to write about these things. I'm going to write about other values. I'm going to make connections that are going to surprise, that could potentially lead to insight, so what moments, so that the reader will be caught off guard. Each time you use one of those values that surprise us, we get an insight into how you think, how your brain works. And that's how you stand out on the essay. Now, just a quick word on the University of California essays, if you happen to be applying there, and because UCLA happens to be the #1 school that people apply to with almost 100,000 applications, chances are that some of you on this call are. The UC prompts changed, and people wondered, well, why did they change? Just really quickly, too many students were being indirect in their statements. Each of the questions reflects back to the 14 elements that the UC essays are looking for. Sorry, they're not essays, they're called prompts. And there were many academic responses. And so, I'm going to kind of fast forward through this part so we'll have more time for questions. But essentially, this is if you're applying to those schools, this is the simplified version of those prompts. Leadership, creativity, talent or skill, challenges, academic subject. Now, all of these topics are topics that you'll probably need to write about on your supplemental essays. And by the way, your supplemental essays are additional essays besides your Common App main essay that you'll need to write for schools, for private schools. So here's another tip. When you're starting to brainstorm your essays, put all of the prompts that you're going to write on one common spreadsheet, and then start to brainstorm, okay, how can I double, triple, and even quadruple use my essays? I can answer more about that in the Q&A if you want to know what I mean by that. On this, which structure is better? This is not like a hard and fast rule. I think that the narrative structure works well for essays on leadership, educational barriers, the significant challenges, and the last prompt, which asks what sets you apart. And I think Montage would also work well for leadership. The essays on creativity, talent or skill, academic subject, example of improving your community, and what sets you apart. So someone asked in the chat box, when would you use Montage structure? On any of these essays, prompts 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. And also, if you've never faced challenges, that's when I think a montage might work well, because essentially it gives you a little more latitude. You don't have to focus on one particular moment that changed your life, because many people don't have those life-changing moments. You can instead make a big old list of all the things that you want the college to know about you. And then in a montage structure, you just need to find one thing that's going to connect them all. If you look on my website, you'll see another example of an essay called the endodontics essay. And the common thing that connects all of the stuff in his montage essay is the desire to want to be a dentist, which you find out at the end of the essay. Okay, home stretch. If you'd like some more resources, I've spent a few years putting together a bunch of them for you. So this is my website, College Essay Guy, And there's a link called the free stuff. That's my most popular thing to click on. I could tell you about some other stuff, but that's probably the one to check out first. You'll find a free guide to writing your personal statement. And I've gone through some of it with you in the brainstorming part. It's got the objects and the values exercise. And then in structure, I've got the 4 types of essays. I've got examples of each and a step-by-step for how to write each of those. Well, it's kind of a brief step-by-step. If you want the full deal, you're in luck. And coming up in July 10th, which is about, 11 days from now, I've got a week-long workshop. It's called How to Write the Personal Statement. And the promise of this, or the goal, I should say, because we're doing it together, is that in a week you could write your personal statement. So think about that. You go from I have no idea what I want to write about to I've finished my Common App. And it's July 10th through the 17th. The time is going to be this exact time, 5 to 6:30. It'll be an hour-long session just like this with a half hour for Q&A. And some people might be thinking, well, what if I can't make every session? Don't worry. I'll send recordings nightly. And get this, the cost is pay what you can, meaning there's a suggested cost that you can check out on the website, and I'll send you more information on this. But I want this to be available to anybody no matter what the cost. So I'd really rather you just come and join and pay what you can than not have the resources. So I heartily invite you. And feel free to ask me questions about that if any of that's not clear. That's what I got. Here's my email address. You can hit me up on the Twitter and the Tumblr. I've got a cool Tumblr page too. And I should add this, but I'm now on Instagram and Pinterest and Snapchat even. And that's what I got so far. So I'm opening up to questions. So ask me, what do you want to know? What do you want to talk about? Someone's asking, let's see, I answered that. Someone asked, can you give some examples of hook sentences? Yeah, if you go to the free part of my website, you'll see sample essays, and you'll see some great essays with hook sentences. I wouldn't obsess about the hook. I would obsess a little bit more on what you want the college to know. So I think sometimes people try and have that catchy opening. That only gets you so far. I think the content of what you write about is more important than the opening line. Let's see. So for the week-long webinar, if you just go to, somebody's asking, what's the website? Just go to collegeessayguide.com. Kayla asks, how long should your personal statement be? The Common App main personal statement is 650 words. So that's what you're aiming for. It's about a page. What else? I do, by the way, work with students one-on-one, if anybody's wondering that. And you can just contact me through the website. I'll send an email out to everybody who's on the webinar, and it'll have my contact info is right here. Someone's asking, should my personal statement appeal to emotion? Yes. Does it have to be about the darkest, deepest secrets and moments in your life? No. There are many fun ways to appeal to emotion. But I think it's a good idea to try because life is emotional. So how do you overcome students who are shy about writing about themselves? Eva asks. Eva, I do these exercises, and I do an exercise called the feelings and needs exercise. If you Google the feelings and needs exercise, that is almost a surefire way to get a student to write about him or herself. And I'll say this, Eva, I don't actually find that students are shy about writing. They might think that, but once we do the exercises, they're cool. Someone's like, guys are hard to open up. No, if they do the objects exercise, yeah. Can the personal statement be funny? Absolutely. Yes, for sure. If you're funny, your personal statement should be funny. Mia asks, my student will be out of town during the workshop. How long will the recordings be available? Mia, forever and ever, as long as you need them. Kayla says, I didn't get all the information on boring essays or statements considered by UCLA. Is that on my website? Yeah, it is. If you just actually Google how to stand out on the UC essays, or actually just search that on YouTube, how to stand out on the UC essays, you'll see you'll see a whole YouTube video on that. It's about 35 minutes long, but it's all about how to stand out on the UC essays. Noah asks, once we have the topic of our essay, do you have any recommendations on how to write an introductory sentence? No. Here's what I'd say. Because I don't, and I think you asked this about the hook sentences. I wouldn't focus so much on the introductory sentence. I would say just start writing your story and start telling your story. And what do I mean by that? Like, I would say actually just imagine, like, pull up your phone and like do a voice memo. And no, that's not true. I do have advice about this. Okay. Let me, I'm not trying to dodge the question, but I just didn't have anything at the top of my head, but now I do. I want you to imagine a dark screen at the beginning of a movie and it's silence. And then you hear a line in the silence over the darkness, like a voiceover. And if you want an example of what I'm talking about, you can watch the movie, oh gosh, what's the movie about the girl who's Divergent. At the beginning of the movie Divergent, she's got this voiceover and you can you see all these images and you can kind of get the feel of, I think that's the feel of a personal statement. So you can YouTube Divergent opening. And you can kind of get the feel of what I think a great personal statement how it should begin. Here's another tip. Tip 2. Now I'm on fire. No. Start with the phrase, if you really knew me, blank. And if you really knew me, what would I really know about you? And make it not informational, but make it personal. Make a confession. What's something that I would really know about you? And then cut the words, if you really knew me. That can help too. That's what I got. How do I make uncommon connections? Someone asks. You look at that values list and you decide what would what would the cliche version of my essay sound like? What values would there be connections to? And then you agree to, silent promise to yourself, not write about those values. And then you find uncommon values to connect them to. How do you do that? With lots and lots of practice, or with a partner. You sit across from a partner and you go, okay, basketball. And you try and come up with something, let's say basketball is your thing, that your partner would not be able to guess. So basketball and privacy is an uncommon connection because you probably can't guess how I would connect basketball with privacy. If you can guess it, I'm throwing it out. I'm not going to use it. So you can basically play this game with somebody sitting across from you and seeing if the person can guess your connection. If they can guess it, don't use it. Find something else. Is it wise to write a non-specific essay ahead of time, then make it more specific as I apply to different colleges? So your Common App main personal statement will be a specific essay about your specific life, and you'll send that to all the colleges. So I wouldn't say ever write a non-specific essay, but if you mean write an essay because there are two types of essays, right? There's your main personal statement that'll go out to all the colleges, and then there will be particular essays to those particular schools, which will be separate essays. So I hope that's clear. If it's not, ask me. Would I ever do a live in a classroom workshop? I do it all the time. I do about 30 workshops a year. Feel free to email me about that. What should you not share? Like if your challenge was depression, it's okay to share just about anything. Just don't focus on it. Make it the first third of your essay, the challenge you went through. And then within the first third or half, get to what did you do about it and what did you learn? I talk about a lot more on the webinar that's coming up. Can you go back to the screen with the parts of the narrative essay? Bijoy, if you just Google narrative structure, college essay guy, you'll see the parts of the narrative structure. How do we sign up for the workshop? Is it an in-person workshop or a webinar? It's a webinar just like this, and you can sign up. You go to collegeessayguy.com. At the top, there's a banner. You just click on that, and you can sign up there. I'll also send you that information in a few minutes. Actually, not in a few minutes. It'll be, I want to get into Stanford. Is that similar to the UC prompts? No, they're different prompts. If you look on the Common App, you'll see the Stanford prompts. And if you look at the UC website, you'll see those prompts. How are essays different for graduate school? Depends on the school, but usually you have to write a main personal statement, and that is not different. But actually, I would say here it is. One difference is that it's important to say what you want to do and why. So you kind of need to do a why us essay at the end. What do I mean by why us essay? If you just Google how to write a why us essay, you'll see a 3-part post that I wrote on that. If you want more, I wrote a complete guide, 20 pages on how to write a why us essay. So if you're applying to grad school, make the first 2/3 or the first, let's say 3/4 about your personal statement and your story, and then end it with why you want to go to this particular school. Can I apply these values from the seminar to other colleges outside of California? Absolutely. Everything that I've talked about applies to schools outside of California. Sometimes I don't feel confident when I'm writing or how to write. How can I build confidence as a writer? Kayla, practice, practice, practice. Do it again and again and again until you eventually, actually, I would say do that, but I would say also don't, I'm trying to give quick advice on how to become a great writer. It's just writing. It's just writing a lot. And once you write a lot and you work hard on something, and by the way, this will be, if you write the 15 drafts that it'll probably take you to write this will be the best piece of writing you've ever written. And I wouldn't show it to too many people. If you show it to too many people early on, that can really dim your confidence. So write for you at first, or pick one person to help you with your personal statement. Once you've figured out exactly what your personal statement is doing, then start showing it to people. But only when you know why it is what it is. Someone asked, what city are the workshops in? So if you go to my website and you click on workshops, you'll see places where I'm delivering live workshops. But those aren't for a while. So I would say if you want to catch me live, as it were, that's why I do these live workshops. So in July, I've got this July 10th to the 17th, I've got this How to Write the Personal Statement workshop. If you're applying to California schools, in August, I'm going to have a 4-day workshop on how to write those. And you'll find that on the website. And then in September, I'm going to do an essay on the supplemental essays. So the city that the workshops are in is your city. Do all colleges require a personal statement? Great question. No, they don't. If you go to the Common App, which is where you'll find most applications for, particularly for highly selective schools, you'll see what their essay requirements are. If you're applying to a state school, just go to that school's website and you'll find out what they are. Some schools do, some schools don't. Will colleges have a word or character count limit on personal statements? Yep. Most of them use Common App, and that's 650 words, as I mentioned earlier.